Hey moms, welcome to the Virtual Six Figure Mom Podcast, a show for moms who want to achieve their definition of success while managing their day-to-day responsibilities and maintaining some sense of sanity along the way. Let's jump into today's episode. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, mom friends. I am excited about today because in my head, she is like just part of my core mom friend circle at this point. We have Tatiana Chamorro, an accomplished marketing entrepreneur and mom who is super passionate about helping other women and supporting other women along their respective journeys. And so I have her here today. I asked her to join me and talk about her process, which, my hope is that you all take notes somehow, because we're going to talk about how she has set goals and how that's contributed to her success. We're going to talk about how she balances, right? And how she plans, right? So much. And she, listen, you're in for a treat. I've talked already a couple of times. So grab your notepads. This is going to be good. And feel free to come back and visit and listen often to this episode. I promise it is that good. So without further ado, Tatiana, introduce yourself. First of all, welcome to Virtual Six Figure Mom Podcast. Super excited to have you. Talk to us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is exciting. It's exciting to be connecting with other moms and just sharing a little bit about what that looks like for me as an entrepreneur. I am originally from Nicaragua, moved to the US about 8 years ago with our 2-year-old son and my husband. Moving meant we were leaving our family behind. So it definitely was a whole transition for us. And since then, we went through with, I finished my undergrad, finished my master's, and then started a business. So it's been 8 years of a lot of different paths in the journey.
Yeah.
That's what I've been doing.
Yeah. And you said, so you came here with your 2-year-old son. So you already had a child when you went to school, when you started this business. So you're doing mom, wife, student, right? And then entrepreneur.
That's
How did you keep it together? If you did, because I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that, oh my gosh, how are you balancing it all? And sometimes I'm like, I'm not, right? It might look like that on the outside, but I promise I'm not. So how did you keep it together during those periods of transition?
I think that what you said, I love, because you mentioned, how did you keep it together if you did? And I think that we grow through it, we go through it, but it doesn't always mean that we're okay through it, right? It's stressful, it's tiring, it's exciting at the same time. And sometimes we feel like we're stuck. So I definitely had all those feelings during the last couple of years. And a big part of it was also I analyzed myself, right? And I analyzed what I'm feeling, and I tried to understand it. And I kind of give myself feedback or thoughts that would help me push through, right? So one of the interesting things for me specifically is that when I was coming to the US, I was coming from Nicaragua. I was 22 years old. I had never cooked. I had never cleaned. I didn't know how to wash laundry. I was coming in and becoming, in essence, for the first year, a housewife, because coming in as an international student allowed for my husband to study, but not me, because I was a dependent. So that's a terminology used for somebody who is a dependent of, somebody here studying or doing whatever. But it didn't allow me to work. It didn't allow me to study for that first year. And I knew that. So I came in mentally prepared to learn all these different things that I had never learned. And it was quite a journey, but it was also, and I remember, very frustrating, because I felt stuck for a little bit. I felt like, okay, well, I'm not advancing in my career. I haven't finished my undergrad. In that moment, I'm thinking, where am I? Am I ever going to do that? What if it's a year, but it really turns into 7 years? And this is what I do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So there's different parts in my journey where I have felt in different ways. And it's important to just kind of reconnect with why you're doing it and where you're going by doing what you're doing in that moment.
That's good. You talk about feeling stuck, and I think a lot of us can relate to what that looks like, kind of the uncertainty of it all, not feeling like you're fully in control of your next steps. But then you talked about sort of reconnecting with your why and doing that self-work, right? So when you reconnect with your why, right? So for me, that'd be like, okay, Christina, why do you want to become an entrepreneur? Why do you want to do this? And why do you want to impact the lives of so many? Um, for me, I have to write it down. For me, what doesn't get written doesn't get done, right? If it's not on paper somewhere in a planner, on a spreadsheet, I will either forget, or you know what? There is no or. I will simply forget. It will fall to the bottom of the list, and other things like my duties here at home will sort of just pile on top of it, and I'll forget sort of that core of, okay, this is something that fuels you. Mm-hmm. So tell me this. Where do you write your why, if you write it at all? And then what your process looks like to say, okay, this is my why, and here's what's next. Here's how I'm going to get to that, right? Because you sound very process oriented to me. I'm hearing that in what you say. So talk to us a little bit about what that piece of it looks like.
I remember when I decided to go back and finish my undergrad, and I studied visual communications. I'm a creative soul. And I remember telling one of my professors, I'm going to change my career because I had this idea, and I found, in visual communications, the career takes 5 years. I had already been through 3 different other colleges, and I had transferred many times. And so I found out that by that time, I had my son, who was, I think, 4, and I wanted to have a daughter. And I thought, if I wait, I have still 3 more years to go here. Mm-hmm. I could change my career, graduate in 6 months, and then do my master's. And by the time I finish my master's, I would have been just finishing my undergrad, right? Yeah. So I shared all of this with the professor, and she said, I never would have considered you a planner. And I thought, I had never thought of that, but I am absolutely a planner, especially with the challenge of coming to the US and having to figure out steps, especially when you go through a legal process and you do that, properly, that you need to plan. You have to be a planner because things, there's different paperwork that you do, different legal things. You need to find a lawyer. You can't find the lawyer the day before you have to apply for certain things, right? So you have to plan. And I think that was part of me as a young, mother, wife. I started to realize that 1, I'm a planner, and 2, I need to be okay when things don't go as planned, because that happens all the time, right? I love saying you plan and got laughs. And it certainly does happen. So you have to also be okay with it going a different way, which is a challenge in itself. And then the other thing is you need to also identify your own way of making things happen. And that's where I believe a lot of young people will fail, because they don't realize, I started doing planners and I wouldn't read them. But then I was like, okay, but that's not helping me. Yeah. So what I realized is planners don't work for me. So what works for me? So I think the idea of finding the way that you can achieve things is an ongoing discovery within yourself. And that's something we need to be very open-minded and aware of, because if you're putting it in your planner, but it's not happening, that's not the way that works for you. Mm-hmm.
This is good. And I'll tell you why specifically, because right now, as we speak, I'm sitting here with my digital planner. I switched over to digital planning, I guess it was last year, but I also whipped out my paper planner today. And I said, I think it's time to go back to planning in my physical planner, right, for this season in my life. Mm-hmm. So you talked about finding what works for you. And I think even as we drill down into that, what works for you in that particular season, because this digital planner for me was what, I think of as the bee's knees. It was perfect. Mm-hmm. But now I'm like, I have this, this, and this, and I want to categorize this way. And I want to be able to see this sort of view and feel the paper. So that's interesting in terms of finding what works for you. I'm also heavily reliant on my phone. So what tools are you using now? Are we thinking about phone? Is it like more whiteboard? What are you using to plan now?
It's an interesting concept because it depends on the path in which you're in professionally or even personally.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we need to always keep top of mind. It needs to change as you grow, right? So initially I was doing post-it notes. When I started my business, I would do post-it notes on the people I needed to follow up. I do post-it notes on things that I needed to accomplish. Then I started a second business, and then I started a third one, and then post-it notes were like messy. It was like too many post-it notes. I couldn't know which one was for what. Some wouldn't get accomplished, so it'd be a month later and I see the post-it notes. In fact, I have like some old ones here, and it's just, and then I would start drawing on them, and then it just like a cluster of post-it notes. And then it was annoying. And so what I started to do is I went into my notes on my phone and I started using them. But then there were a million notes, and then I needed to like organize them into the different things that needed to happen. And then I started getting over 20 clients, and now it's like just too much, right?
Yeah.
So then I went into Evernote, which is a digital form of like, note taking, allows you to organize it much better. It still was not the solution. I loved it for like 2 months, but it wasn't the solution because you needed the app to like open it. If I send it to someone, they needed to download the app. It was just, but here's the thing about that. Through all of that, I tried 4 different ways, and I identified, okay, I already took a week organizing everything in Evernote. This doesn't work. If we do not prepare ourselves mentally for that transition and dynamic journey, then we are overwhelmed, because after spending a month or an hour or a week passing everything onto Evernote, and you're like, oh man, this isn't what I needed. Now you're like, well, never mind. I'm just not going to do it anywhere. So I think we just need to like go into it knowing that that might not be the solution, and that all of that needs to be very dynamic. Because if I decide to sell one business tomorrow, or open a different thing, or become an advisor in a different business, that's going to keep growing and evolving. And the needs of how I manage my time is going to keep changing, right? Yeah. When I was doing my master's, I only used my folders in my computer, and that worked because I had like a folder per semester, and I would go in, and in each semester I would have a folder per class, and that was great. That was enough. But then I changed and I grew, and my day-to-day looked different. So that needed to change too.
Yeah. Wow. I told y'all this one was going to be good. So I think about the need to be flexible, right? And sort of during that test and learn phase, right? Understand that you may not get it right the first time. Don't spend a whole lot of money on trying something new. Like if it's some software, get the trial period, test it out for free, see if it works. And if not, it's okay to shift gears again. There's so many different tools. Were you able to incorporate family stuff in that? Because it sounds like, you have it down for business. How do you weave in the activities for the kids, the date nights? Like, how do you keep all of that together? Is that in one place?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think because that also changes as your, day-to-day changes.
Yes.
And when, like I'm going to say when I started college, I remember that I had this schedule where I knew that I finished class. I would go to work in the morning. I would go to class in the afternoon. Some days my classes would end at 11 p.m. So then my husband would help me with my son. And here's the other thing. I knew that wasn't my life forever. So I was okay with that being part of my story, as long as I knew that wasn't going to be what my day-to-day was the rest of my life, right? But we forget, because when you're doing a master's degree for 2 years, or you're doing your undergrad for 4, you forget that that's not going to be you start to believe that that's it, because that's your daily, life. Yeah. So that was hard, because sometimes I'd be like, I can't, like, I want to go be with my son or this and that. And I wouldn't stay in class until 11 p.m. every day. But I remember during my master's, I had to study on Saturdays and Sundays. I had to, like, I was reading 60 pages a day, and then doing, coursework and this and that. So I balanced my time, but I also blocked it. And when I use my calendar, that's the first thing I started to do. I started using my calendar. Now, when I block it in my calendar, I also block it in my mind. Like if it says that you're going to be spending time with family, I will be doing that. And I know myself. So I know that if I'm on my phone and a message from a client comes in, I'll review it. If a phone call from a client comes in, I will answer. If I had an assignment that I needed to turn in and the teacher then messaged me after I turned it in, I will, respond. So I would intentionally say, okay, well, Saturday from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., I'm going to be with my son and my husband. I'm going to leave my phone because if I take it, I know I'm going to be responding.
Yeah. So you, right? So that's
Yeah.
part of that work you do on self-awareness, self-discovery. I'm hearing a lot about knowing what you're working towards. And of course, that makes me think of goal setting. What does that process look like for you? How often are you doing it? Are there certain tools that you prefer? Or, talk to us about that, because in addition to the process-oriented side of you, I'm hearing a very goal-oriented side as well.
I think that that has also been a transformative journey. There's two sides of that. The first one is you have your own personal goals, and then you need to have shared goals with your partner, because if you don't communicate those goals, that person that you love could also start to question, are we moving in the right direction, right? Why am I taking care of our son on Saturdays? You should be spending with us time. But if you both have spoken about it, then they're doing it in a supportive way, understanding that that's not the forever, right? Yeah. And so for me, it has been a lot about, here's one of the most interesting things that I have seen, discovered, or experienced. When I was younger, my goals were very straightforward. I want to graduate from college. I want to then do my master's, and then I want to open my business. It sounds very vague. Obviously, if you dig in, there were let's call them sub goals, which was, okay, in order to graduate from college, I need to find 7 scholarships. I need to find a job, blah, 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 right? Those are the things that I need to do in order to accomplish the big goal. However, about 3 years ago, my husband and I completed all those goals that we had set, right? And we found ourselves in a place where our goals now felt bigger than us. Now I want to own a 300 apartment complex. That feels crazy, Yeah. And then when we own the 300 apartment complex, now I want a 2,000, or now I want to start a scholarship. Now I want to invest in a university or buy my own university. And the thing is that when we start accomplishing other goals that feel bigger than us, we start to feel, it feels crazy. It feels like now, the door is open. Before it was obvious. You want to graduate from college. Those are the things everyone wants to accomplish. But now the goals is what do you want to do? What are your goals? What are you setting? And that conversation needs to happen. Because I remember that as soon as I graduated from my master's, my husband got a really good job. And then we had already bought our first home. I had started my business. We found ourselves feeling a little lost for about 6 months. And we didn't realize it was because of that. Because now the goals that we had been working towards for the last 7 years had happened. And now the goals we were setting just felt crazy. They felt bigger than us. They felt maybe even more unachievable. And so it's important that you, even when you reach those big goals, you now talk about the next one. And it doesn't mean that goals need to be somewhere where you build your wealth. A goal could also be somewhere where you're, buying a home for your mom or a car for your sister or anything like that could also be in it.
That's good. That's good. Because you talked about incorporating family into that goal setting process and how important that is. Yes, individual personal goals, but at the same time, you're in a family unit. And so everyone needs to be aware of kind of what you're working towards so they understand, okay, mommy's not here today, but that's because mommy's working towards, buying the vacation home for the family, so we can travel to Costa Rica, wherever I'm going. No, you get what I'm saying though, right? And because everyone is going to be impacted by the work you're putting in to achieve those goals. Do you feel like you have balance? And I say that because you're a super successful entrepreneur and a mom and a wife. you didn't grow up here, right? So, the US is still, it's forever evolving. It feels like, every time you turn around, there's something new for everyone. There's so many pieces to your life. Do you feel like you're at a point of being what some would term balanced or have that harmony?
I don't think balance is something you can have. I think balance is something you need to make. In different moments of your life, your balance is going to look different. And if you don't intentionally make decisions to balance the things that matter to you, balance will not exist, right?
Yeah.
So I feel in a point now where the business is in a healthy stage. It functions with or without me. And I feel like I can now, here's the thing. And I realized that, like 2 years ago, for the first 7 years that I was here, my husband and I were working, studying, being parents, and I would sleep on an average at about 12 p.m. every day. The first time that after graduating from my master's, I started my business. And I remember the first time I told my husband, it's 5 p.m. and I can do whatever I want. Like, I don't need to sleep at 12. Yeah. And it felt so weird to feel that. Now, a lot of people listening might be like, oh, you're crazy. How can you be sleeping at 12? I never actually had an all-nighter when I was doing my master's or my undergrad, because I structured everything in a way that, okay, if an assignment is due in 5 days, when do I need to start, right? Like, I was really analyzing it.
Yep.
Because I think as a parent, you got to do that. Because if you don't do that, there's no way you're going to be able to balance anything out. And so I then found myself being a business owner, and there's so much flexibility in time that I realized being a business owner is hard in the other side, because it's so flexible that if you don't force yourself to have structure, things don't happen, right?
Yeah.
And so I think balance is something we just need to create in whatever way that looks like for you.
Say that again. And it looks different depending on the season you're in. So balance for me, during my years in corporate looked one way versus what I view as balance now. It's very, very, very different. Let me ask you this. I know you are committed to doing work to support other women, right? And really, really passionate about seeing other women succeed. How are you realizing that passion? And I say that because I imagine there's a mom somewhere who, maybe, working in corporate, maybe an entrepreneur, but they're passionate about something else, right? And it's like, okay, how do I feed that passion? How do I pour back into my community? What are you doing to really support other women? And what advice do you have for a mom out there who wants to do the same?
I'm going to answer that question with the root of where it sparked my interest in being. So, I come from a Hispanic country. Usually they are also very sexist. Fortunately to me, my family is, not sexist in the way that traditionally pushes women to just be a housewife, let's say. If they even if they don't want to, right? Because it's different if you want to be a housewife, and that's okay. But if you're forced to, then that's another conversation. So my sister, she's a doctor. She's 2 years younger than me. She works, she's in Boston right now. And my grandmother wanted to be a doctor. Her husband, my grandfather, is a doctor. And her dad didn't pay for her college career because he said being a doctor is not a women's job. And it only took 2 generations for her granddaughter to become a doctor. And I always think about that. I always think about how much impact and how much change we can create by just being part of that different, denominator. And another big example is my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, I believe, maybe finished high school, didn't go to college. And when I speak to her, she had all these dreams, but being a mom, and she loves saying, like, I wasn't allowed to do anything else because I needed to be a mom. And I like to be part of the message of you can do both, right? So public speaking is a way in which I impact. I also do consulting and just mentorship. I love having conversations like this. My aunt, for example, also didn't go to college, and she is an amazing interior decorator. So
Mm.
she came to visit me and I said, like, you need to open your business. And I said, I have a budget, decorate my house. It took her 3 days. And you should see like the difference between before and after. It looks like a whole different house. And that also, allows her to believe in herself. And I believe that a big setback for women is that we don't believe we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Agreed.
it's breaking a barrier there on just our mindset.
Yeah. Having someone who believes in you, who encourages you, and who's willing to support you, right? To be that cheerleader every step of the way, that champion to kind of say, no, you got it, go, go, go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll tell you that for me, that was my husband. Like, I remember my husband telling me, no, you got it. You can do it. You are smart and this and that. And even through some things where I was like, I don't even know what an LLC is and the difference between that, back then when I was starting my business, and he would like sit down with me, explain it. He helped me making sure that everything was legally put in there, supported me through a lot of the things. But a big part of that is just being there for the people you love so that they can start believing in themselves too.
Wow. That's it right there. Yeah, that's it right there. So, wow. So for the mom listening now, right, who says, I want to pursue a path of entrepreneurship. I don't know where to start. Do I start with the goal setting? Do I start with the networking? How do I get on track to achieving whatever my definition of balanced success is? What's one thing you'd say to her now, Tatiana, in terms of what she could work on next?
I was having a conversation today with one of the women who wants to buy into the Height franchise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she said was, how do you plan in order to go into becoming a business owner, leaving corporate where you make X, right? And feeling okay with that transition. And I said, well, first you need to identify why you want to become a business owner, which I'll be completely honest, I had no idea what that was until I became one. And now that I manage a large team, I'm like, this is such a different idea than what I thought being a business owner was. I still love it, but there's challenges that I didn't even think of. And I can understand how different this is. And it may not be for everyone because it's very stressful on certain things. All the problems come down to you and you are the decision maker. And sometimes when we jump into entrepreneurship, we jump in not knowing all the answers. Yet when we build our team, we figure it out. We become like the mothers of the company, right?
Yeah.
So what I told her was, think about what if you don't do it? Like if 40 years from now, you never did it, how would you feel? And what is the worst thing that could happen if you do it? I wouldn't go into depth. Like if you're considering opening a business and it'll require $1 million investment and you've never ran a business, I personally would move away from that. But for me, the first step is just doing it. Like whatever that looks like, go into LegalZoom and pay your LLC.
Yeah.
It might not, lawyers right now listening to that might be crying from what I just said, but if you don't know how to get started, just go in and do it, legalize it and figure it out. And trust me that there's a lot of people out there building their businesses that don't have the answers to everything. I mean, the first thing that was very scary for me, what if I build my business and I do the LLC, but I did something wrong in there? Because I'm also a perfectionist and I'm like, and then, the IRS comes for me. Like, ooh. I'm so scared of that, right?
Yeah.
Or if I hire someone and I didn't put their name somewhere that needed to be like, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yep.
And a lot of times those thoughts will be bigger than just doing it.
So just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just do it. Do you feel like you practice self-care? Are you taking care of you and everything else you have? You have a large team. Are you taking care of you?
I think that I am now. When starting the business, there's a lot of time and involvement that I need to give to the growth, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I've always been very conscious about a mental balance and emotional balance, because I cannot not be strong for my children, right? I don't want them coming back from school and me being frustrated from work. That is not why I became a business owner. Mm-hmm. So you got to also find, what does it mean to take care of yourself? For me, it means taking summer off and going with my kids to Nicaragua for a month and having them in a school there, coming back. They now speak Spanish because they were in a school there for a month.
Yes.
Finding those little things that help me balance. And when I say take off, I don't mean I disconnect entirely, because as a business owner, that doesn't exist, but it means I'll work for 3 hours in a day, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that now I am feeling comfortable with being okay on doing things that are just for me. Because also as mothers, we put others first. And we feel guilty. We feel so guilty that we're going to get our nails done because that's an extra expense. And what about maybe just use it for the dentist, or I got to take the kids to get new shoes and my nails are not that important, right? So I am mentally like, no, this is for me and it's okay. It's okay that I do something for me.
I feel like that's where we wrap up. There was something about that said, that was it. Right? We talked about balance. We talked about success. And then we talk about doing something for you, which a lot of us, if I'm going to use the F word, fail at. Like we're miserable at it. My daughter needs glasses again. I've never seen a child run through glasses as much as she does. Someone told her she could sleep in them. I don't know why, how, but that's neither here nor there. But how we prioritize others and sometimes neglect ourselves, right? There's no way for us to ever achieve that balanced success if we're not also prioritizing ourselves and our well-being, because we will just fall apart pretty much. This has been amazing. And I say that because it was the permission I didn't know I needed to fully dive into shifting back into this planner. Like allowing yourself the flexibility to shift, right, at different points in your life. So this is amazing. Like I said, I count you as part of my mom friend circle, Tatiana. And I appreciate you saying, you know what, Christina, whenever you're ready, let's talk again. So thank you so much. And I know mom friends around the country and the world, thank you as well. This has been great.
Thank you. I just, just to add to that, be okay with change, because we connect change to failure, and that is not how we should connect it. Change is adapting and improving. And so if you need to change your planner, change it. If you need to change your strategy, your goals, change them. That is okay.
Wow. Mic drop. Be okay with change. Mic drop. You don't need permission from someone else. Just be okay with it, right?
That's right.
Awesome. Thank you, Tatiana. It's been amazing, as I knew it would be. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. Make sure you stay connected with the Virtual Six-Figure Mom community. Hit subscribe for podcast episodes. Visit our website at www.virtualsixfiguremom.com and join our growing online community on Instagram and LinkedIn.